Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We're diving into something I think a lot of you are interested in, and that's biohacking.
Absolutely. We'll be using Smarter Not Harder by Dave Asprey to guide our deep dive.
And this idea of being smarter, not harder, really resonates with me. There's just so much information out there about health and energy optimization. It's easy to feel overwhelmed.
Right. It can be a lot. But Asprey's book really tries to simplify things and focus on, like he says, the minimum effective dose.
So, what can our listeners expect to get out of this deep dive? What's the mission here?
We're going to break down the core principles from Asprey's work. We're going to extract those actionable insights that can actually help you boost your energy and well-being.
Because who doesn't want more energy?
Right, exactly. And one of the most interesting ideas from the book is this concept of your Meat OS.
Meat OS, yeah, it's such a catchy term.
It is, isn't it? It's basically Asprey's way of saying, look, your body, it's like an operating system.
But maybe not the most up-to-date software.
Right. You could use a few updates. And one of the key things he points out is that our bodies are inherently lazy.
Meaning?
Well, we're programmed to seek out the easiest, quickest fix,
No.
the path of least resistance.
Ah, that makes sense.
And that's not always the best thing for us in the long run. Think about it. Your Meat OS, it defaults to energy conservation.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
So you see this play out in our daily choices all the time. You've had a long day at work, you're tired. What's easier, whipping up a healthy meal or swinging by the drive-thru?
Definitely the drive-through, even though, in the back of my mind, I know it's not the best choice.
Exactly. Your body prioritizes that immediate convenience over those long-term health gains. Biohacking is about learning to reprogram that, I guess you could say.
And Asprey really walks the walk. He shares his personal journey in the book, going from being overweight and dealing with health issues to becoming this, successful entrepreneur with 11% body fat.
It's inspiring, isn't it? It makes you think, okay, if he can transform himself using these principles, what's possible for the rest of us?
For sure. And one of the things that struck me was his point about exercise. He says if you follow conventional wisdom your whole life, you could end up spending over 20,000 hours exercising.
Wow, 20,000, that's a lot of time.
Like 10 years of full-time work just working out. Asprey argues that there are smarter ways to get fit, ways that don't consume so much of your time and energy.
I think that's a really appealing idea for a lot of people. Finding ways to maximize your fitness results without having to spend countless hours at the gym.
Yeah. And speaking of being smarter, not harder, there's this fascinating story Asprey tells about his early days working in IT. He found the work so incredibly boring that he started automating everything. He was like, there's got to be a better way.
Oh, tell me about this. I haven't gotten to that part yet.
So he starts writing all this software so he could manage like tons of computers at once, which was unheard of back then. And you know what? This desire to automate, to be more efficient, actually led him to some of the early concepts behind cloud computing.
That's amazing. It's like his laziness actually pushed the field forward in a way.
It really is. And it speaks to Asprey's whole philosophy. It's
Yeah.
not just about working less, it's about working smarter, finding those leverage points where you can get the most impact with the least amount of effort.
Right, working with your natural tendencies instead of fighting against them.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about energy. I mean, that's something I know I could always use more of.
Absolutely.
And Asprey makes this really bold statement. He says, energy is our most precious resource. It's the foundation for everything else we want to achieve in life, whether it's earning a living, having more free time, or even just, feeling good.
He makes a good point. Energy is the currency of life, isn't it?
It really is. And he points out that as we age, the function of our mitochondria, the little powerhouses in our cells, tends to decline. And this, he says, is one of the biggest reasons we experience less energy as we get older.
It's like our cellular engines start running a little rougher over time.
Yeah, exactly. But Asprey's point is, this decline isn't inevitable. We can take steps to optimize our mitochondrial health and maintain our energy levels as we age.
It makes you think about aging in a whole new light, doesn't it? It's not just about wrinkles and gray hair. It's about the health of these tiny powerhouses inside every one of our cells.
And he's speaking from experience here. He talks about how he spent, get this, over $1 million trying to regain his energy when he was younger. He was dealing with chronic fatigue, brain fog, all sorts of stuff.
Wow, $1 million. That shows you how much he valued energy.
For sure. And I think it highlights the profound impact that low energy can have on our lives. It's not just a minor inconvenience. It can really hold you back from achieving your full potential.
And if you think about it, the statistics on obesity and overweight, especially in America, are pretty alarming. Asprey makes the connection that a lot of this might be tied to, these foundational resources that we're talking about, the things our bodies need to function optimally.
Okay, so we've established that energy is critical, and our bodies, thanks to our meat OS, might be a bit predisposed to taking the easy route. Now, Asprey dives into something he calls anti-nutrients. These are substances in our food that can actually create friction in our bottles.
Resource friction, he calls it. Basically, these compounds make it harder for our bodies to absorb the nutrients we need.
Okay, so give us the rundown on these anti-nutrients. What should our listeners be aware of?
Well, he focuses quite a bit on phytic acid. It's found in a lot of plant-based foods that are often touted as super healthy, like nuts, seeds, beans, whole grains, soy, even corn.
Wait a minute, so you're telling me these healthy foods actually have stuff in them that blocks our bodies from absorbing nutrients?
That's right. And the problem with phytic acid is it binds to essential minerals like calcium, iron, magnesium, zinc. It prevents our bodies from using them properly.
So it's like we eat these foods thinking we're doing something good for ourselves, but then this phytic acid comes along and kind of handcuffs those minerals, makes them unavailable.
Exactly. It forms compounds called phytates, and our bodies can't really break those down very well. Asprey points out that humans, we don't produce a lot of the enzyme needed to neutralize phytic acid. So we're not really designed to eat large amounts of these foods without taking steps to reduce the phytic acid content.
Like soaking or sprouting.
Yeah, exactly. Those methods can help break down some of that phytic acid.
He also talks about lectins as another big anti-nutrient. Where are those typically found?
Lectins are found in a variety of foods, including nightshade vegetables like tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, peppers, also in grains and legumes.
And what's the problem with lectins?
Well, they can interfere with the absorption of certain minerals too, like phosphorus, iron, calcium, zinc.
Got it. So we got to watch out for those. Now, Asprey shares a story about his own experience with phytic acid that really illustrates the potential downsides.
Oh, the cracked teeth.
Yeah, that one. So he was following a vegan diet, which, a lot of people think is super healthy, but he was eating tons of nuts and seeds, which are high in phytic acid, and he ended up developing cracked teeth because he was so deficient in minerals.
It's a pretty powerful example, isn't it? It shows that even diets that are considered healthy can backfire if you're not paying attention to things like anti-nutrients.
Absolutely. And this isn't about demonizing plant-based foods or anything like that. It's about understanding that, even the healthiest foods have their nuances.
Right. It's about being informed and making conscious choices about what we eat.
Okay, so beyond these plant-based anti-nutrients, Asprey also talks about certain types of fats that can hinder our energy and well-being. He specifically calls out omega-6 fatty acids.
Omega-6s, yeah. He distinguishes them from omega-3s, which are generally considered beneficial. He argues that the modern Western diet is way too heavy on omega-6s, which are abundant in oils like canola oil, corn oil, soybean oil, cottonseed oil.
And the problem with these oils is that they're very unstable, prone to oxidation, especially when they're heated up.
And that oxidation process can lead to the formation of free radicals.
Free radicals, those are the bad guys, right?
Pretty much. They're unstable molecules that can damage our cells and contribute to inflammation in the body.
And inflammation is at the root of so many chronic diseases.
Exactly. And he even mentions a study, the Sydney Diet Heart Study, which found a link between higher omega-6 intake and an increased risk of premature death. It's pretty surprising considering these oils are often marketed as healthy.
Right, because they're plant-based.
Yeah, but Asprey argues that the processing these oils go through makes them less than ideal.
Makes sense. Now, what's interesting is the contrast he draws with animal fats, things like tallow and butter.
Yeah, he says these fats, which are mostly saturated, are much more stable and less likely to oxidize, so they don't contribute to that free radical formation as much.
Okay, so something to think about. Now, the last thing he talks about in this section on things to potentially avoid or limit is histamines, those compounds we usually associate with allergies.
Right, that stuffy nose, itchy eyes feeling.
Yeah, but Asprey points out that certain foods, especially fermented foods and leftovers, can contain significant amounts of histamine. And for some people, this can trigger all sorts of issues, even if they don't have a full-blown allergy.
Yeah, he talks about how histamines can activate mast cells, which are part of our immune system. And this can lead to inflammation throughout the body.
He even suggests that this issue might be more pronounced for people who've had COVID or have been vaccinated.
Really?
Yeah, he says many people have reported increased sensitivities and allergies after having COVID or getting vaccinated. And he proposes that histamine could be a contributing factor.
Interesting. So we've covered a lot of ground on things that can potentially drain our energy and create problems in our bodies. Now, let's shift gears and talk about what we need to thrive. What are those essential resources that Asprey recommends we prioritize?
Well, he starts with the basics, the right kinds of fats, those essential fat-soluble vitamins A, D, K, and E, and then the big minerals like calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium.
The building blocks, right?
Exactly. But he makes this point that even if we're eating a really good diet, it's often tough to get optimal amounts of all these nutrients from food alone.
Especially with modern farming practices and the depletion of nutrients in the soil, right?
Yeah, that's a big factor. And then there's the practicality of it all. I mean, who can eat a perfectly balanced, nutrient-rich diet every single day?
It's a challenge for sure. And that's where supplements can come in handy.
But he's not advocating for just taking a handful of whatever's on sale at the vitamin shop, is he?
No, he's very clear about that. He really stresses the importance of getting objective measurements and personalizing your approach.
Yeah.
It's not about blindly following someone else's supplement regimen. It's about figuring out what your body specifically needs.
So how do you do that?
Well, he talks about things like tracking your sleep, monitoring your blood sugar levels, maybe getting your bone density checked, even looking at markers of inflammation in your blood work.
So using data to guide your decisions.
Exactly. It's about becoming a biohacker, in a way, experimenting and paying attention to how your body responds to different things.
Okay, let's talk about some specific nutrients. He
Mm.
spends quite a bit of time on vitamin D3. What's the gist there?
He recommends around 5,000 IU per day as a general guideline, but he also emphasizes that this can vary depending on factors like your weight, your skin color, and even where you live.
And he's a big proponent of taking vitamin D with vitamins A, K, and E, right?
Yeah, he stresses the importance of balance. He says taking vitamin D in isolation can actually be detrimental.
And what about vitamin A? We often hear about getting that from veggies, like carrots.
Asprey clarifies that the real, usable form of vitamin A, retinol, mainly comes from animal sources, things like liver, egg yolks, full-fat dairy. While plants contain carotenoids, which our bodies can convert into retinol, that conversion isn't always efficient.
So he's saying that supplementing with preformed vitamin A is often necessary to get those optimal levels.
Exactly. And he emphasizes taking it with vitamins D, K, and E for the best results.
Now, vitamin K is another one that doesn't always get a lot of attention. What does Asprey highlight about its importance?
He talks about its role in directing calcium to our bones, where it's needed,
Yeah.
and also preventing calcium from building up in places where we don't want it, like our arteries.
That calcification thing, right?
Yeah, that's a big one. And he distinguishes between different forms of vitamin K, with K2 being particularly important for bone health and preventing calcification.
And then there's vitamin E. I always get confused by all the different types of vitamin E on the labels.
I know, it can be confusing. Asprey advises against the synthetic forms of vitamin E, which are often labeled as DL-alpha tocopherol. He's a big proponent of the natural forms, which act as potent antioxidants in the body.
What do antioxidants do again?
They help to protect our cells from damage caused by free radicals. Remember those bad guys we were talking about earlier?
Oh, right.
Asprey suggests that if you've consumed a lot of those omega-6 rich oils, you might need higher doses of natural vitamin E to help counteract the damage.
Okay, good to know. Now, he also mentioned something I found intriguing, using herb and spice supplements. It's not something I'd really thought about before.
Yeah, he talks about how traditional cultures have used herbs and spices for their medicinal properties for centuries. And many of these herbs contain valuable minerals and antioxidants that can support our health.
So it's not just about flavor, it's about those concentrated beneficial compounds.
Right. He mentions things like Panax ginseng for energy, Siberian ginseng for endurance and immunity, cinnamon for blood sugar control, saffron for mood and brain health.
There's a whole world of herbs and spices out there. It makes you want to go exploring.
It does. He also touches on prebiotics and probiotics for gut health, essential amino acids for muscle building and recovery, and collagen peptides for supporting our skin, joints, and tendons.
And when it comes to choosing supplements in general, he offers some really solid advice, doesn't he?
He does. He says to choose reputable brands with clear labeling and to be wary of supplements that have a bunch of underdosed ingredients, what he calls vanity ingredients.
Because those aren't really going to do anything for you.
Exactly. It's about getting quality over quantity.
Mm.
And he even shares his own extensive supplement routine, although he admits it's pretty extreme. The takeaway is it's all about personalization. Find what works best for you.
So let's move on to minerals. Asprey calls them biochemical superstars. Why does he give them such a prominent role?
He argues that minerals are often overshadowed by vitamins, but they're essential for energy production and so many vital functions in the body. He uses the example of our bones. They're not just made of calcium. There are over 20 different minerals that work together to create strong, healthy bones.
And he goes on to explain that there are different forms of calcium, each with unique benefits.
Yeah, like calcium AKG for muscle building, calcium D-glucarate for liver detoxification, calcium AEP for cell protection, and calcium fructobarate for bone density and stress support.
It's amazing how complex our bodies are.
It really is. And magnesium is another mineral that Asprey emphasizes. He says many people are deficient, and it's involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body.
Wow, 300, that's a lot.
It is. He recommends getting 500 to 1,000 milligrams per day, ideally through a combination of different forms, particularly those ending in 8 like magnesium thronate, which is good for the brain.
Now, here's something I found interesting. He actually challenges the conventional wisdom about sodium. You know how we're always told to cut back on salt?
Yeah, he explains that sodium is actually crucial for a healthy stress response and for maintaining a balance with potassium.
So he's not saying go crazy on the salt, but he's saying we shouldn't be afraid of it either.
Right. He recommends choosing unrefined sea salt over processed table salt because it contains other beneficial minerals. And in terms of potassium, he advises getting around 5,000 to 6,000 milligrams per day, both from food and potentially supplements.
Okay, so we've covered the big minerals. What about those trace minerals you hear less about?
Yeah, those are important too. Asprey describes them as essential catalysts for many enzymes and antioxidants in the body. Things like copper, iodine, iron, manganese, zinc.
And he stresses the importance of balance, right?
Absolutely. He uses the example of zinc and copper. Taking too much zinc can deplete copper levels, which can lead to problems like premature gray hair and other issues.
So it's all connected.
It really is. Our bodies are these intricate systems where everything interacts.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Smarter Not Harder, it's clear that Asprey offers a really refreshing perspective on biohacking. It's not about becoming some superhuman or following a rigid set of rules. It's about understanding our own individual biology, our own meat-OS, and working with it to achieve our goals.
I completely agree. It's about embracing our natural tendencies, like that inherent laziness he talks about, and using them to our advantage.
And it all starts with those foundational elements, right?
Yeah.
Paying attention to what we're putting into our bodies, minimizing those anti-nutrients, and prioritizing those essential vitamins and minerals.
Exactly. It's about giving our bodies the resources they need to function optimally. And then we can start exploring those more advanced biohacking techniques that Asprey outlines in the book.
Right, because what we've covered today really just scratches the surface. The book goes on to delve into strategies for enhancing strength, improving cardiovascular health, boosting brain function, managing stress, even optimizing your spiritual well-being.
It's a fascinating journey, and I encourage our listeners to explore further if they're intrigued by what they've heard today.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Now that you have a better understanding of your meat-OS and its inclination towards taking the easy route, what's one small but impactful change you can make today to start running it more efficiently? What can you do to unlock more of your energy and potential? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.